You can hear him hosting the Athletic Football Show. It's Robert Mays joining us now on the Emerald Queen Casino Sportsbook Hotline. Robert, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Great. I mean, we are in the middle of a head coaching search here in Seattle. We've also got plenty to talk about when it comes to the NFC conference game coming up here. We'll talk about the AFC as well. But we're going to start with the head coaching search. A few names coming off the board. Obviously, the Titans look like they're set to make their own hire. We're all anticipating Jim Harbaugh is going to go to the Chargers, but a few names remain available for Seattle. Is there anyone that intrigues you in particular to replace Pete Carroll?
I think a lot of names on that list are intriguing. I've thought that Raheem Morris deserved another shot for a long time. His background, the amount of offenses he's seen, the amount of defenses he's seen, personality-wise, the problem-solving he's done with that defense in Los Angeles. He's interesting to me. I think it's hard not to be intrigued by Mike McDonald. What they've done defensively over the last couple of years, to me, it's like a perfect modern defense. It is able to change week to week depending on the opponent, the ways that they've gotten the best out of their personnel consistently. They've gotten career years from so many different guys within that defense, whether it's in-house draft picks, one-year free agents. So those two definitely jump out. But there's tons of other guys. I mean, I can understand the appeal to a guy like Dan Quinn. I get some of the younger offensive coordinators being exciting just because we've seen so many teams go with that model over the last 3 or 4 years and find a lot of success. I mean, this is one of the more exciting, kind of encouraging pools of candidates that I can remember over the last couple of years.
You know, that was going to be my question exactly, man, because the NFL is going young, right? You see a lot of these 30-something, early 40-year-old guys getting opportunities, but this class is still headlined by some OGs in Jim Harbaugh and Bill Belichick. When you look at just the contrast in age and style, does this class remind you of any class here in the past few years, or is it uniquely different?
Oh, I think it's definitely uniquely different. I mean, beyond the Jim Harbaugh, Bill Belichick part of this, I mean, Mike Vrabel losing his job is something no one could have predicted. So you have this blend of unknowns that it's that, you know, would you rather have something that you totally understand and you know maybe there's a ceiling on it, or something that's complete unknown? There's a risk to that. And I think the contrast between those two types of candidates is really interesting. But no, I mean, there's never been a coaching class that involves arguably the greatest coach of all time, and then a guy who we've seen have a ton of success at both levels deciding that this is the year he wants to come back to the NFL. So whatever path you want to take as a franchise, that path is probably available to you with this group, and I think that sets it apart from other years.
What makes Seattle a desirable team to inherit for a new head coach? And if you're that new head coach, what question might you still have about this team?
That second part is a really good question. I think it's encouraging because they've done a really good job of just showing stability over the years. They've been consistently competitive. And I think there are some people who might come into the building with the dynamic now that John Schneider kind of has control over the roster and say, you know, this is something where now I'm reporting to the general manager. The power hierarchy maybe isn't necessarily in my favor, but I think that you would vote for the stability over maybe not having a direct line to the owner like you might in some other situations. I think there's a selling point about the talent on the roster. I know it was kind of a disappointing year when you compare it to the preseason expectations, but there's still a lot of pieces on this team. There's a lot of young pieces on this team. So I think the underlying talent and the organizational stability would be the two things that would be the most appealing to me. Other than that, I mean, if maybe you're not in love with Geno Smith as your answer quarterback, I know I would be excited about him, but this is something you're locked into, so there's maybe less flexibility there. And there are probably some areas on the roster that need a little bit of retooling, but I think this is a very good job. And when you compare it to a lot of other jobs that traditionally come open, I think that there's a lot to like about it just because this isn't a team that fired its head coach because it was a disaster. It's a team that fired its head coach because he did 15 years of the same voice and the same messaging, and sometimes you just need a change. And I think that's a good spot to land if you're a coach looking for the sort of opportunity that doesn't always come along.
Robert, Stacey and I have gone back and forth for weeks talking about just this defense, man, because you look at Devin Witherspoon, Reek Woolen, Jordan Brooks, Julian Love, and you say, okay, there's some talent over there. But then obviously the message wasn't getting across, and these guys as a whole aren't performing at a high level. And the Hawks have tried, right? You bring over Leonard Williams halfway through the season. Okay, we're going to make improvement there. You bring over Jay Reed. It's not for lack of trying that this defense did not perform. What do you think is missing when you look at the defensive side of the ball?
I think it's just a clear vision, and I think it's somebody who understands the the weaknesses and kind of the blind spots in that vision. And what they tried to do over the last couple of years, I totally understand the plan. You bring over Sean Desai, you hire a guy like Carl Scott. You're trying to bring in these new ideas defensively and evolve in real time to align with some of the more modern thinking that's going on around the league. But by bringing in these people to kind of moonlight and having this operation by committee where you still have Pete, who's maybe not as comfortable or fluent in these ideas, it all felt like it was kind of thrown together in the sense that you didn't have somebody who was at the top of it being like, this is the vision I have, and I understand all of the pluses and minuses of playing this way defensively. And that's why I think somebody like Mike Macdonald is so intriguing, because that level of defensive talent that they have, to me, it's more a question about it getting unlocked than it is about whether they have enough pieces. So that's why somebody that comes in with a clear point of view on defense, I think, could be really, really interesting for this team specifically.
We had some other folks come on here who were really excited about Mike Macdonald as a potential head coaching candidate for Seattle, just because, especially in the NFC West, where you've had, young head coaches and really innovative head coaches, the idea of like the defensive version of that, I think, is really exciting to a lot of people to kind of combat Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan and everything they can do. But I'm a little unfamiliar with the rules around it. It doesn't seem like Seattle requested an interview with him prior to the divisional round. Does that mean that they just have to wait until the Ravens are eliminated?
I think they can request something next week, I want to say. I think during the off week of the Super Bowl, before the Super Bowl, that there's an option there. But I'm not totally familiar with the rules because they've recently changed.
Okay.
So I don't know exactly what the timing on that would look like.
We were talking about how important it is to hire assistants, right? We looked at the Niners and the Rams, and the thing that impressed Stacey and I the most is that they hire coordinators who go off to be head coaches. How much responsibility falls on the head coach to hire those guys, and what role do you think a GM plays when it comes to identifying guys who are leaders amongst men who can go off and lead eventually? Because we feel like you have to hire guys who are going to move on. You don't want to hire guys who are going to be complacent and just want to hang around for a long time.
I think that's on the head coach, and I think that that's a skill. I think that you see coaches around the league who are very good at identifying coaching talent. And Sean McVay has done an unbelievable job in the people that he's surrounded himself within that building. And it's not an accident that many guys got head coaches from that staff, and a lot of those guys have gone on to have success. And I think that that's why I'm encouraged by some of these younger coaches. They're the networking kind of talent, how plugged in they are, the amount of stamina and energy they have to kind of have their ear to the ground, know who's good, know who's not. I think that's a skill in and of itself. And as we're moving toward more coaches who may be these kind of culture setter CEO types, if you look at what Dan Campbell has done in Detroit, I think that a lot of teams may start trending in that direction, especially because the offensive play caller model, eventually the pool is going to run dry.
Yeah.
Eventually, we're in a spot now where Bobby Slowick and Dave Canales have done this job for 1 year, and they're in conversations for head coaching jobs because those trees have been so thoroughly picked over. So if the stronger candidates are going to be some of these more CEO types, you need real strong staffs around them. And I think that's one thing to learn from what the Lions have done. Dan Campbell did such a great job of building the right people in place, and having somebody like Ben Johnson on that staff in a tight ends coach role, being able to elevate him to offensive coordinator when the situation called for it, that speaks to the depth of the staff that he built. And that comes from years and years and years of being an assistant and just being around, knowing who was good, knowing who wasn't. So I do think that that's a crucial skill, especially maybe as we pivot away from the offensive play calling head coach, and you need a strong offensive coordinator to go along with your head coach hire.